I'd say the internet and the mobile are the closest big things that really changed the enterprise. But it took a long time, understanding engagement and monetization and everything else. Generally, everything says that AI is getting adopted faster, but there will be a new set of ways in which we sort of think about work that is different. There is going to be a lot of disruption. And the question is, how do you navigate that? And you have to be super alert. The only way to sort of manage the disruption and navigate it is by being actively in it.
Hi, I'm Boaz, founder and CEO of Augmented AI Labs, and I'm excited that you're tuning into the Shift AI podcast, a show that explores what it takes to thrive and adapt to the changing workplace in the digital age of remote work and AI. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Venky Veeraraghavan as our guest. As Chief Product Officer at DataRobot, Venky brings a unique perspective on the evolution of AI, having spent 20 years at Microsoft working on everything from Azure Machine Learning to the early days of Azure OpenAI. His journey from predictive AI to today's agentic workflows gives him a comprehensive view of how AI is truly transforming the enterprise. If you're interested in understanding the difference between predictive AI and generative AI, how agents will orchestrate complex business processes, or what the future holds for the agentic workforce, you are not going to want to miss this episode. We also want to send out a special thank you to Augmented AI Labs, along with the new legal AI platform Clause, for sponsoring this episode. So let's get to it. All right. Venky, thank you so much for joining the Shift AI podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thanks, Boaz, for inviting me. I'm so super happy to be here.
So I'm going to let you fill in the gaps, but you've had a long career in the Seattle area, spent many, many years at Microsoft working on lots of different data teams, which I'll let you kind of discuss. And now you are the Chief Product Officer at DataRobot. And that has, post ChatGPT, that has all sorts of implications that we're going to get into today. But first, tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. I joined, so I've been in Seattle area for about 24 years. Good to meet another Seattleite. And, the bulk of that was at Microsoft. I've been there for about 20 years. I guess broadly it was in four sort of like big chunks. One was I joined Microsoft as a program manager in 2001. I worked in SharePoint. I sort of went through a bunch of end user features, personalization, people search, things like that. So we tried to build an enterprise newsfeed in the early 2000s, sort of to mimic the Facebook one. Then I moved to the platform side, really worked on sort of the core SharePoint platform and moving to the cloud and the authentication system for clouds. So really did a lot of back-end sort of platform stuff. And then I finished that. I sort of in the early 2012, 13 phase, I was sort of kind of done with sort of doing an app, and I wanted to do something more interesting in the cloud. And so I moved actually to China to build a back-end system for the big data back-end system for Office. And now it's called observability. So basically logs and metrics and sort of how do you sort of process all that. It was, it's planetary scale, really challenging problem, and sort of one of the first really large big data systems that was built in the industry. So that was cool. And then, as with all companies, we had now an exabyte of data, and we were like, surely there must be things we can do with AI. And we sort of started building the AI platform for Bing and Office. And that's how I moved into sort of the AI side of the world. That was about 2017. And then sort of worked through, I guess, till about 21, sort of worked on really on the AI platform. We also ended up merging with the third party or external facing product called Azure Machine Learning, and sort of pulled the platforms together. So I ran product for Azure Machine Learning, Azure Cognitive Services, and then eventually the beginnings of Azure OpenAI. So that was a long 20-year arc. So
yeah. What made you want to move over to DataRobot at that time? I mean, this is pre-launch of ChatGPT, and you didn't know that was coming. So I mean, what was going through your mind at the time?
I've done a lot of work at Microsoft. It's been 20 years. Everyone thought I was a lifer. I thought I was a lifer. But then, this opportunity came along, and it was sort of exciting because it was by the way, I had competed with DataRobot when I was building Azure Machine Learning, and they were sort of best in class for automated machine learning and sort of democratizing AI. And so I was always interested in getting in front of the customer and sort of like seeing the technology work. And, working for a smaller company was just that much closer to the customer. It's not like I didn't get there in Microsoft, but it's just everything is a much different scale. And so I wanted a smaller company that I had sort of bigger influence. I ran all of product. And so that gave me a little optionality to sort of, drive the thing more holistically. So I felt like I had the skills. I wanted to test it out with the business. It was also growing really quickly at that time. So that was a great opportunity for me to learn a new set of skills I couldn't do at Microsoft.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you, I want to take a step back and explain to the audience a little bit about the differences between predictive AI and generative AI, because I think these days people hear AI and they immediately think of generative AI.
Yeah.
But there was a world where predictive AI existed and ChatGPT didn't. And when you joined DataRobot, that was the world we lived in. So I want you to kind of explain that to everybody, but then also talk a little bit about where DataRobot fits in then and now in that machine learning environment.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great question. People forget there was a world of AI before ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
the bad old days, as we say. And so, broadly we call it predictive AI. And so, it was a little bit more math oriented, I would say. And there's a sort of close version of predictive AI, which is perceptive AI. And so, there's sort of like the idea of like predictive AI basically says, if you have often a table, let's say you have a bunch of columns, and you say, look, I want to predict using all the data in the columns, like one of the last column, which is like common example would be, will the customer churn at renewal day, right? So lots of factors, there's usage, customer complaints, customer satisfaction. So there's a number of what we call features that affect the likelihood of a customer wanting to churn. And so basically you train a model and you say, great, here is my historical data for the last 12 months, 12 years. And this is how sort of customers have behaved. So normally when they have a really repeated poor customers interactions, they're likely to churn. And so the model makes that prediction. And there's a mathematical model, there's many techniques. And so the idea behind AutoML was really saying, hey, look, since the source and the target, which is the thing you're trying to predict, are known, why don't we just try to sort of train a model? And there are many ways to train a model, and then you sort of figure out which is more accurate with a number of metrics. So that's sort of at a heart. So it sort of automated that process. It was very good. It depended a lot on sort of what's called feature engineering, which is how do you process all the data to extract the signal. And that was, DataRobot is world-class and still world-class in that space. The predictive model sort of extended that, and perceptive sort of was things like, hey, can I do speech to text, image recognition, image sort of segmentation, etc. So the number of things that we could do in sort of video, in audio, in images, etc. Generative AI is different in the sense that it was really about like sort of asserting what's going to happen in the future. And so it's sort of like it did predict the next word. So normally the classical thing is like it says, here's a sentence or incomplete sentence. What is most likely the next word? You take that and the next word and you sort of build this thing out. And depending on the settings, it can be, very spicy and sort of creative and sort of go into hallucination, or it can be very sort of like, down to earth and try to be factual. So that is sort of how the model is trained. And so in many ways, in some deep ways, it's sort of similar, but but by the time it gets used, the use cases are quite different. And, generative AI, I think we see when it's grounded with real facts, can be a great place to sort of explain and interact and create a very sort of compelling user experience and easy user experience for people to actually interact with very complex data and concepts and knowledge, actually. But it still can't solve problems, which people keep waiting for it, but that's not there yet. And I think the Agentic AI is the beginning of sort of really starting to take action and do stuff. And so that's sort of the next iteration of it.
I mean, when I think about it, I think about structured data and not unstructured data. I mean, the world that you were living in before ChatGPT was very structured. I mean, you were going into databases and making predictions.
That's right.
Now, it seems like there's an opportunity to take both the structured data and the unstructured data and make predictions. And you guys have incorporated large language models into your offering. You have an orchestration layer. There's all these different ways that now predictive and Gen AI have mixed together. So can you talk a little bit about the opportunity there? Like when you have the ability to do both, what does that open up for you?
Really good research on your part. So we've been on this journey really since I started. Like I came in November 21 and sort of, really sort of pushed DataRobot to be a more end-to-end platform that sort of covers all of AI. And given my background, I sort of knew what was coming with OpenAI and deep learning, etc. And so we really got on a very quick start to sort of update the platform. And so we sort of moved to Kubernetes, cloud native, that allows us to sort of have a single format and sort of use a lot of open source software. We started getting support for GPUs in the platform. and then support deep learning as well as sort of a normal classical machine learning. And that sort of our first launch in 23 under my sort of product strategy was when we started introduce sort of the idea of like generative AI built in. We could run LLMs, we could connect with LLMs, use it for explaining predictive models, for instance, and start summarizing sort of things like that. But we've gotten more and more sophisticated over time in terms of like having an LLM gateway that allows us to get access to all the different models, supporting RAG pipelines, retrieval augmented generation pipelines. So we sort of became a full-featured AI platform. And so what we think about, when we think about full-featured, we think about like the full life cycle. So we're one of the only ISV platforms that sort of support everything from, building the AI solution, sort of governing it, sort of making sure all artifacts and sort of you sort of understand where everything's going, and then operating it, which is really sort of running the model or the workflow, monitoring it, mitigating it, and sort of like improving it over time, sort of the full life cycle. And as we've sort of added these things, we've said in the last 4 years, we've sort of gotten Predictive AI, which was our first, then Generative AI, and now we're into Agentic AI, and we have a launch coming up end of the month that we're very excited about, where we are really sort of going end to end on the agentic side. And so we believe that having all three is super important, actually, especially in the agentic world. Because when you talk about agents, they want to have access to all the tools, right? And you can have a tool that is doing forecasting, right? So you say, given this data, what should it be? So when someone is doing a planning agent and say, hey, look, I want to understand what is the supply chain shocks that I'm facing, and what is likely going to happen with a 25% increase in tariff, right? You could ask LLM, but it'll just sort of make it up. It doesn't have any reasoning capabilities. Now, but if you had a tool, which is a predictive model, a forecasting model, which is state of the art, that has been trained on previous data and can know how people react to price increases, you now suddenly have a great tool that can be injected. You can also have a knowledge tool that, let's say, has all your suppliers and your sourcing and all their sourcing policies. And then you have sort of a web scraper or a deep research agent that's able to say, what is the tariff today against a given country? Suddenly, the supply chain panel is saying, hey, look, I have access to all these different AI, but I have a single way to interact with them, right? Yeah. And that's what makes it really compelling, which is not just having generative AI models, or you want to sort of have all these AI together and you want to sort of compose them. And I don't think we quite got that in generative AI when we were talking about RAG, but now with Agentic, we're really sort of saying, hey, look, it really is a modern distributed system. We have all these different things running, and we have this sort of LLM-based orchestrator that's sort of working to pull all the right things together and checking its own work. And so that suddenly becomes a very compelling value proposition for the user to really simplify and access AI.
Yeah, I like the way that you described that. And I may be dumbing it down a little bit, but when I think about those kind of predictive tools or tools in general, I think about function calling or MCP, or ways that the large language model can just go to a place, understand the thing, and then bring back the correct information. Is that how you think about it as well?
That's right. So in our platform today, we are we're introducing sort of function calling, sort of calling our predictive models as tools, and we'll support MCP shortly after. And so it is exactly that, which is that each one of these models is an API. It has certain functionality. It can predict the future. And so the question is, what does it, so you describe that, and then the LLM can decide whether it wants to use that or not, and for what reason. And so it suddenly makes this, the old world of saying, hey, look, the predictive thing was a dashboard with some charts and a data scientist to explain why it has to happen, suddenly becomes a completely interactive experience. You can do things like what if. You can say, I'm predicting with this input. Then you just say, hey, what happens if I give a new input? The LLM can really repurpose a new API call to the prediction, and then sort of get a new answer and then respond back. And it'll remember the old answer and the new answer. So suddenly it becomes a very, very compelling experience for understanding the future. And sort of, and I'm using predictive as an example, given your question, but you can sort of build a very interesting enterprise agents that can really augment people's, augment roles in the company.
Yeah. The orchestration layer is fascinating to me. I want to talk more about that. And also, this, at the beginning of 2025, this was the year of the agent, according to the media, and so that became the buzz. And, I think that a lot of businesses are still trying to figure out exactly how that's going to work for them. I don't think it has really kind of manifested itself in every single aspect of the business, though I know people are excited about it. It's starting to kind of deploy. From your perspective, given that kind of cocktail of agents and and function calling that you described, what is the future going to look like once this really gets deployed and this agentic workflow is playing itself out?
I guess educated speculation, I guess, would be the best, or educated guessing. But I think the thing that is sort of nice about agents is in many ways uses the old forms that we're used to. So if you think of a multi-agent or agent thing, it's like there is a bunch of tools which are like, I guess, conceptually equivalent to microservices. You have this sort of top level orchestrator that's like sort of pulling everything together. And each one of these scale differently and they sort of do different functions. And there's a layer on top, is the app or the business logic before. Now it's an LLM that's pulling and synthesizing and sort of issuing new sort of requests. And so in many ways, it's sort of a fully functional distributed system. And it's has a great UI, right? In the UI is sort of this chat interface, this panel interfaces now that people are thinking through, or canvas interfaces. But I think it's much easier to use. And so what I actually do believe in the agentic future. And I think the way it's going to happen is sort of this induction of these sort of agent. I think some people have the agent workforce, but the idea is that, you have these set of agents that are tuned to different roles, right? So if you're a data analyst and you're sort of working with data, you want an agent that's going to have access to all the company's data that you are allowed to see, and then you can ask questions of it. If you're a knowledge worker, you want to say, here is all the stuff that I'm working on in my role. What can I ask questions of? So suddenly this idea of like searching over all your SharePoint or searching over all your Google Drive for information just becomes a trivial thing, because it's just sort of done inside an agent, right? And that's where co-pilots and things are going. So the idea is that for each role, there's likely to be one or more agents that really sort of work on. So I'll sort of extend this to a place where everyone's talking about devs, but think about, like, I talk about supply chain, but even think about like a warehouse, right? So, you have a warehouse system in the back that's sort of structured data that's sitting in SAP. You now have like sort of all these sensors, video cameras, robots that are moving through the warehouse that's getting live information, and you can process that live information and augment that. And now you can, as a warehouse manager, you can say, hey, look, for the next pallet that's coming in, like, what is the right place to put it in? Because you might have a traffic jam, you might have an accident, right? And your enterprise warehouse doesn't know it yet. So you now have this ability to sort of like now say, reroute it to the new place, which is like, where there's less traffic or it's safer, there's more overall space. And so you actually can think of these agents as helpers who are augmenting users and really sort of like, make it much easier to sort of consume a ton of information, and not just consume, but also then act on it. So they can say, tell me what happens if I do this, right? I put something in here, rerun the same sort of job with a new outcome or a new input, so to determine the output. So I think it's going to be very, very compelling to productivity and sort of like, making decisions quicker. So that's kind of where we are going towards, which is like, supporting this sort of having lots of agents in the enterprise and having them sort of manage. If you think about, if you're anthropomorphizing with this sort of workforce concept, then you have hire to retire. It would be like sort of inception to deprecation, sort of all parts of it. You need to understand its behavior, you need to coach it, upskill it, train it, understand what changes happen to it. So all of that sort of work is going to be part of what you want to manage in the enterprise.
I want to take a minute and talk about today's sponsor, the Clause AI platform. If you're on a revenue team, you know the frustration. Deals stalling in legal review, contracts sitting in queues, quarter-end crunches that feel chaotic. And if you're in-house legal, you're feeling the pressure from the other side. Business wants deals done yesterday, leadership wants airtight risk management, and your team is already maxed out. Well, here's the thing. This isn't a legal problem or a business problem. It's a collaboration problem, and that's exactly what the Clause AI platform solves. They've built an AI platform specifically for enterprise legal and revenue operations. Contract review, deal acceleration, policy management, workflow optimization. But here's what makes it different. It's designed to bring legal and revenue teams onto the same page, working together. Legal becomes an enabler of speed, not a blocker. And business teams get the velocity they need without cutting corners on risk. So whether you're in legal ops trying to scale your impact, or you're on the revenue side trying to close deals faster without the constant back and forth, check out Clause. Go to clause.so. That's CLAUSE.so, and schedule a conversation with their team. And now, before we dive deeper, I want to take a quick moment and tell you a little bit about one of our podcast partners. As a listener of this show, I know you're trying to stay on top of all things AI and tech, which is why you have to check out the amazing GeekWire podcast, produced by GeekWire and hosted by Todd Bishop. It's a treasure of insights featuring industry leaders and the latest tech trends that are shaping our world, and the perfect companion podcast to Shift AI. GeekWire Podcast is where technology meets curiosity and covers the world of technology, startups, and geek culture. Expand your tech horizons and join the conversation. Tune into the GeekWire Podcast today, a perfect complement to our own discussions here. Don't miss out. Follow the GeekWire Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Now back to the episode. So there's kind of two things that I'm curious about. One is a more technical thing. Like, does DataRobot think about the UI layer for that orchestration? You know, like, let's say you had 50 robots working for you. You're the human. You know, it's hard to manage all those people if they were human. It's probably going to be hard to manage all of them if they're if they're AI. What does that layer look like? You know, from a UI standpoint, how do I interact and keep track of and, manage all of that activity?
Yeah, great question. I don't think we know fully yet. So I think what we're doing is we're kind of keeping our options open. So last fall, we introduced this idea of having an application built on DataRobot. And so if you're building that new and you're building a new idea that doesn't have a place, our customers can sort of build a UI on DataRobot and deploy it. But we're also working closely with companies like SAP to actually inject this work back into the end user surface. So if you're doing something like an SAC, SAP Analytics Cloud, and you're doing financial planning, you kind of are already there. You want to see, you want to interact with it, in terms of forecasting and planning downstream. So we're sort of keeping our options open. We don't know which one's going to land, and we'll support the agent, cross-agent frameworks, A2A, MCP, to make it available. Sort of like, I can imagine in the future, we don't do this today, but you can imagine sort of working with SAP's Joule, right? And so, or with Microsoft Copilot, the idea is that I don't think we fully know where it's going to land, and with everything, it's probably going to be a little bit of everything with sort of one or two major patterns, and then sort of a long tail of like custom IT patterns that people need to have, and that happens everywhere.
Gotcha. So it might be headless, and you might be doing all the work kind of in the back end, and you might let other people handle
Yeah, I don't think of ourselves as sort of AI, UI first. We certainly have UI capabilities and sort of allow people to have a full DevOps for that. But the idea is that really we are a AI pure play, and so our core is sort of managing the agentic AI full life cycle, not necessarily sort of being the app dev platform for all applications of the future.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the next question that follows up on that, I guess, is more of a societal question. So maybe it's kind of outside of DataRobot, but I'm thinking about all those actions that you described, which is fine-tuning the models and orchestrating those models and doing experiments before you actually tell it to move the palette to where you want it to go. Those are all humans doing those things. And when you think about a future for us as humans, what does that look like when there's 100 or 1,000 or maybe several thousand agents in our businesses working alongside us? Like, what are our jobs? I mean, there's a lot of folks that are very optimistic and that the jobs are going to change, so don't worry. But I wonder, what is the honest answer?
I don't know if it's honest. I think I would say it was my opinion, because I think we have to sort of see what actually does happen there. I think it's going to be a combination of, you get super productive and, you will be able to do bigger things faster. I think that is the optimistic case where you really are sort of focused on, look, companies are able to get a lot more capacity. And I think, we can sort of see, now what do you do with the capacity is different, right? And so today we are rolling out Cursor and others in DataRobot, and we're taking the additional capacity to do more of our roadmap because they're a small startup and we want to do a lot more. But I have other companies say look, I don't need this extra capacity. I'm taking jobs out. And so whether you're augmenting to increase productivity or you're reducing, I think that depends on a company basis. I think everyone has a different answer. But it does sort of give you that opportunity to sort of do that. And yeah, in terms of societal impact, we'll learn with it, right? We've done with SaaS applications, mobile applications, everything. We sort of over time sort of work around it, and really sort of put it inside our system, and then we sort of have a new sort of state. So I'm again an optimist, but I do recognize that there'll be disruptions in the job market because there'll be some jobs that'll get so easily redone by AI that it's possible. But I think it's, there's some jobs that might be done today, but, it's still nervous about its correctness, right? And so a lot of the companies that we talk about, I think you talk about like, hey, look, it's not yet done. Like everyone loves the idea and everyone's experimenting. But a lot of people are very, very careful. I just had a meeting last night at 10 o'clock with someone in the Middle East. And they were like, look, we care about our brand so much that we will not expose any of these agents to a customer, to our customers. We are trying it internally. We're trying different things, but it's not we're conservative. We want to sort of try things, but we care about our brand more than we care about like sort of being one step ahead with bot. And they use all, examples of all the things where bots have gone wrong and say like, look, we cannot afford that for our brand. So I think in the near term, I think there'll be a lot of checks and balances, a lot of focus on monitoring, evaluation, testing, and human in the loop, frankly, right? And so you really want to sort of have that happen until the technology gets a lot more reliable, and then you can sort of say, look, even the second half of your enterprises will also pick it up and sort of deploy it at scale.
So it may go a little slower than folks think, and people might be more careful. I mean, in a lot of ways, that part of your business, which is the monitoring part of the business, the accuracy part of the business, really comes into play because a lot of people are going to care about that. Nobody wants to have egg on their face, right?
I guess different people have different capacity to handle egg on the face. Let me put it that way. And there's a set of companies who will say, look, I want to fail fast. I want to sort of break things and go fast. And they'll be okay with egg on the face. There'll be other companies that are like, no way. I want to make sure I really test this thing. And that is a spectrum. And so what we try to do is say, here are all the tools and that's why we are taking a platform approach. We're not saying here is a single application for you. We're taking a platform approach that says, look, depending on where you are, you can sort of really invest in monitoring and accuracy and, latency, costs, all those kind of optimizations because you want to be sure. There are other companies that are going to be a little bit sort of faster, but they are taking a little bit more risk, but it's okay because they're capable of doing that in the use case. So I think it depends. But we've seen companies do both, but I think it will take longer than we say in the press. People are still moving to the cloud, and cloud was a solved problem 10 years ago, right? And so we still have a lot of customers who are like, we're beginning to make our journey to the cloud. I'm like, okay, so it will take a lot longer than in reality, but at the same time, sort of the core idea has been sort of has seeped into the sort of into society, so to speak.
Are there some things that are happening soon with DataRobot that you had mentioned some releases and some different things? Is there, you want to talk a little bit about product-wise, what's happening and coming up?
We have this launch coming up at the end of the month, so I'm excited about that. So I'll sort of hold the news for that launch. But broadly speaking, we're sort of on this journey where we're really sort of moving to sort of this: how do you support this agent workforce in the enterprise? And that's sort of the problem space and the open space you're running after. The second thing is like, I think that this place is sort of, I think, relatively well served in the cloud, where there's a whole bunch of tool chains. But outside sort of the three big clouds, like there's very little tool chain for that. And so customers really have to sort of struggle with sometimes when they try to do it themselves. And so we seek to help them with that. Once you get past the three clouds, the software tool chain sort of falls apart quite dramatically. It's mostly open source. It's all individual pieces. And it's a very heavy, it's not like they're not good. It's just that it's a very heavy lift for an enterprise IT to put all this sort of systems together, run a multi-scaling Kubernetes cluster, et cetera. And so we try to help on that front to sort of broad range of customers. And so our focus really is getting from sort of this POC stage where people are like trying things out, in their laptop, doing demos, to production where you're really focused on the non-functional requirements of agents. What is the long-term DevOps? So what is day 2? What is day 7? What is month 5? Like, so those concerns are sort of what we sort of focus on. And we've learned it the hard way. Like, we also are amazing at sort of building a model very quickly. But then we learned over time that like, unless you think about day 2 and day 7 and month 1 and month 5, it's not sticky. It doesn't sort of finish, and people sort of move on. And so we really have to focus on that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, I always like to end the show with the same question. And so I'll ask you, if you were to describe the future of work and the future of AI in 2 words only, but then you can elaborate.
Yeah, okay.
So what would those 2 words be?
I would say exciting and disruptive. I think it's exciting because I think I'd say the internet and the mobile are the closest big things that were sort of really changed the enterprise, our work actually. And it really changed everything about it. But it took a long time. Like, it took us like probably 10, 12 years to really internalize internet in terms of what it can do for the enterprise. Like you really went from web pages and was it eyeballs? That's how we started. It's kind of where we are today with the Agentic AI to like really understanding engagement and monetization and everything else. It took a decade. And so I feel like, I don't know if it's going to take that long. Generally, everything says that AI is getting adopted faster, but there will be a new sort of ways in which we sort of think about work that is different. And so I think like I'm excited about that. And as with every single thing, there is going to be a lot of disruption. And the question is, how do you navigate that? And you have to be super alert. And so my view is the only way to disrupt that, only way to sort of manage the disruption and navigate it is by being actively in it. And so my view is like, you can't wait for the answers because you might just get sort of
the wave might crash
right?
on you.
And so you have to sort of be in there, whether you're conservative, whether you're aggressive, it doesn't matter unless you're in there poking at it, try to understand it. Like you will not know how to plot a path, because by the time the path gets plotted, you may not be in it. And so you sort of have to really think. And so that to me is like, you're fully engaged and you have to sort of be all in. And I think that makes it, again, going back to think, very exciting opportunity. It's kind of like every time you wonder, like, how's it going to turn out? History has shown generally turns out okay, but you have to be very much on it.
Well, what I really appreciate about this conversation is the perspective. Many people that get on the show just haven't been thinking about machine learning and AI for as long as you have. And I love, being able to kind of look back on the time at Microsoft and think about how things have changed post ChatGPT. So thank you so much for being on the show. It was really nice talking with you.
Thank you for inviting me in, and it was enjoyable.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Such a pleasure to have Venky as our guest on today's episode. His insights into the evolution from predictive AI to agentic workflows, and his perspective on how enterprises are navigating this transition with appropriate caution, gives us a grounded view of where we're actually headed. From warehouse management systems that can adapt in real time, to supply chain planning agents that combine forecasting with live data, we're seeing how the orchestration layer of multiple AI tools creates genuinely transformative possibilities. I particularly appreciate his honest assessment that adoption will likely be slower than the press suggests, and his advice that the only way to navigate disruption is to actively engage with it rather than wait for the answers. I continue to be amazed by the guests we've had on our show, and I'm really excited about the ones joining us in the near future. I truly appreciate you spending your time with us. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the Shift AI podcast for more exciting interviews, and to the Shift AI Substack for updates on how AI can help you scale your business. The Shift AI podcast is syndicated by GeekWire, and we are grateful to have the show sponsored by Augmented AI Labs and Claws. Our theme music was created by Dave Angel, and the show is produced by Crumpled Ink Media.